Welcome to Project 4, Augmentation, the mask. So with this, we're just thinking a little bit about augmentation, which is something that people often do to either change a part of themselves or use a tool to make help them do something. So, like, I augment my vision by wearing glasses to help me see, or I'm wearing headphones to help me hear better. There's lots of other augmentations out there. There's appendages that people augment. If someone maybe loses part of their leg, they might augment their walking by adding in some kind of a prosthetic. So, augmentation is a very broad term, but we're using it to think about the body and how the body can use how we can use things to help us to do things. And so one thing that we're augmenting a lot nowadays is our breathing. We are wearing a mask as a protective device, but it augments our breath so that we don't get people sick and that they don't get us sick. What you're looking at now, I rarely put my own work in here, but since I specifically made a mask, I thought it would be helpful to show. This is a mask that I made that has a speaker in it, and it is meant to hook to a radio so that the wearer can augment their voice by amplification, or they can augment someone else's voice by letting them speak through them. And it's particularly a piece I made for protests so that you could have micro amplification in a crowd and multiple people could be projecting a similar voice, and the intent is that it would be a voice that maybe isn't heard or underrepresented in that crowd, and so you can give your presence to a voice that's underrepresented, more underrepresented than you, and collectively with other people amplify that voice throughout a crowd. So we're going to look at an artist who has a very broad work. It's a segment of Art 21 that just came out, and this particular artist does a lot of work that has to do with borders. And so she is going to, we're going to watch this video where she talks about her work, but at the very end of the piece, you'll see that she did a particular part where she makes a lot of different pieces to augment her experience and to actually express her feeling about the wall that is built between the US-Mexico border. So after we watch this, then I will show you, we're going to watch the entire video. It's about 17 minutes, and then you will see a demo of me doing the next project.
I grew up in Tijuana, on the border with San Diego. I would cross the border every day to go to school in the US. As a child, I was constantly marked by my border identity, not belonging to anybody, not belonging to the US or Mexico.
¿Esos son mensajes que traen de allá?
Sí, que los niños en Los Ángeles escribieron.
Niños.
Sí, entonces son mensajes de niños a niños. Nuestro gobierno no refleja los sentimientos de la mayoría de los americanos. Estamos con ustedes. A lot of my work is about visibility, having more people see themselves or their struggles mirrored. I think the borderlands mean really opposing things to people. Growing up on the Mexican side, I kind of experienced it a lot as a place of death, as a place that divides families. You make a migration north and you end up in this place that is more beautiful than anything you've ever imagined. But for the most part, people kind of get smacked with just the reality of the border wall. And I think that constant influx of new groups of people makes the borderlands a really experimental place for how societies can recreate themselves. Hola. Pues estoy moliendo pedazos del muro. ¿Me puede ayudar a hacer uno?
Vale.
When I started thinking about a new project, I just kept thinking about the heaviness of bearing witness to these horrible things on the border. I wanted to make a piece to physically expel these things that I had unearthed and this scar that I, kept digging open and digging open. The glass pieces make up a suit. The headpiece is inspired by Mesoamerican imagery. The huarache is designed to fail. So it's designed so that as I walk in it, it starts to break. When I was little, I never knew that art was a career path. I never knew that that was something that you could really do.
Está divertido el plano, ¿eh? Como, you look like the kid in the family.
Considerábamos que podía ella con una carrera medicina, ingeniería, pero ella no quería tener un trabajo, quería tener algo que ella amara. Entonces, ya con eso ya dijimos, no podemos ya decirle más.
No, y luego también.
Que haga lo que ella le
Y luego
llama.
le faltan unos tornillos, así que va a hacer.
I really wanted to study something artistic that my parents could understand and appreciate. That's how I got into studying furniture design. In the beginning of my furniture career, I was felting folding chairs. It was a way of incorporating my border identity into a design object. Taking a temporary, really cold industrial thing, but transforming it into something that was sensual and colorful and comfortable and warm. Making furniture was this place where I could really control the outcome. You kind of look for places to control the world when your world is uncontrollable. For a long time, I didn't know that art could actually make a really big impact on society. It wasn't until I met my mentor, Michael Schnorr, who was one of the original founders of the Border Art Workshop. Michael had been working to make a stance against Operation Gatekeeper.
We are a nation of immigrants, and we should all be proud of it. But we're also a nation of laws.
Operation Gatekeeper was the strategic reinforcement of the US-Mexico border. It forced migrants to cross through the desert rather than jumping across and running through residential areas. The first year that they enacted Operation Gatekeeper, more people died crossing the border than the entire 75 years of Border Patrol history. Michael was showing us how people were using art to make political statements, to change society, but then also talking about the physical space of the border as like a theater for discussion. I started thinking more about taking back the fence and changing it from being a space of pain and trauma into a generative place that we can reclaim. After I left San Diego and Tijuana for a long time, I thought about how to help shape the narrative about the border that was currently happening during the 2016 election. So I founded Ambos, which stands for Art Made Between Opposite Sides.
Masculino no identificado. Masculino sin identidad.
I wanted to work collaboratively with other people, using the border as a starting point for that conversation. We did a project called the Border Kipu. Arte gratis. Sí, porque estamos viendo todas las ciudades fronterizas y le estamos preguntando a la gente que qué piensa cuando cruza la frontera. Y luego lo que les pedimos también es que nos haga un nudo simbólico y todos los nudos de cada ciudad se juntan y se hace una escultura grande. The Andean pre-Columbian system of the Kipu were calendars, counting system, language, but I wanted to use it to visualize our connection to each other, recording our daily migrations to the north, and also physically represent people that participated in the project. What are your thoughts when you cross this border? Económicamente es una ciudad que tiene una gran capacidad de crecimiento. Sometimes I think about how much time I spend here, or if my son will have to do this too. No me gustaría cruzar por cómo está la política, pero en México está peor y es necesario cruzar. We ended up having close to 10,000 people participate. That taught me so much about the vastness of our community on the border, but also the many ways that governments have failed to protect people. If I leave at 9:30, 10, traffic won't be as bad.
I think you get there the same time.
Yeah. Years ago, I started making these bracelets for the museum gift shop. It's a nice way for us to make a little bit of extra money. All of these little efforts help us be able to do all of the nonprofit stuff and community-based work and more social justice-based work. One of the beautiful parts about craft is that it's usually something that gets passed down. A lot of us whose parents migrated, we don't have lineages. I know my grandma's name and that's it. So I really gravitated towards exploring the importance of community and of sharing one's knowledge. When you go in, we'll just say 1 inch.
Got it.
Okay. Y esos van a ser bebés para que los niños aprendan a cuidar cosas, and so they can learn how to take care of their friends, just like you learned, ¿verdad? After having a child, I now think about the world you leave to somebody else. Si quieres se puede bañar allí, you can keep it in there. I have a responsibility now beyond a responsibility to myself. Knowing that has really affected the work that I do, thinking about how to be more empathetic and thinking about what it means to be part of a community. One project that we've done over and over is this performance piece where people stand in a line and they cover their neighbor's hand and felt while their hand is being felted by their neighbor. It kind of becomes about what it means to touch a stranger, what it means to care for a stranger. That moved into me having myself felt it to get closer to what it feels like to felt something. How does my body take that experience that I'm usually putting onto an inanimate object? You have a third one, or should we just try with 2? My new piece is called Metabolizing the Border. I wanted to make a piece that would force my body to deal with the border through all of the 5 senses. So you're forced to see through the fence only. You're forced to breathe through the fence only. You're forced to hear through particles of the border fence.
Okay.
You good? Yeah. You can't escape the border. I'm going to be walking back and forth along the border on the US side, wearing all of these glass pieces. I want to see the pictures.
Yeah.
It looks like a really weird ass alien baby senora. Okay. I'm like anxious. I'm nervous about the like physical demand on my body, and I'm nervous about like the emotional demand. But yeah. Did you sleep okay? It's really hard to fall asleep. I don't know if the performance will be something that's cathartic to put out there what I have been carrying invisibly. Help me pull this part up a little bit more. There is a really crucial need for us to keep talking about the border and to keep exploring what the border is and what the border can do to a person's body. I think art can offer a physical and emotional outlet. By letting people see all of the pain that I carry, I'm hoping that it'll help people empathize and think a little bit more about how we're all connected to each other. In a lot of the work that I do, I engage communities, but this piece, it's a personal piece that I want to do for myself. That really helped me process a lot of that pain and try to get to a point of healing. I needed that.
So what you're going to need for this project is the markers, the mask, which came as that little fabric thing in the plastic bag, the sewing kit, scissors, and then anything you want to add to it. Like I have a button, piece of fabric, and you can find alternate, you're going to see in a minute, some alternate ways to work with this, but that's what I suggest that you start with. If you have another mask that you want to use, that is fine too. This is just a set of masks I could get cheaply, and they were cotton, so I knew that these permanent markers would adhere well to them. So here I am just kind of, so these are permanent markers. They are going to stay permanently on this mask. You might want to put a piece of paper underneath if you're on a nice surface, just in case they bleed through. Right now I'm just kind of playing around with the surface, but as you'll see in a bit, I'm going to start stretching it out, and that really helps to make this a lot easier. And so really the assignment is to think about the ways that you interact with COVID and make something that will help express, just as you saw the artist expressed her feelings about the border wall, and tried to make something that created an experience where she's really taking it all in and feeling that wall, even kind of physically, because she's embedded pieces of that wall into the apparatus you saw. And it was a way for her to really experience it, and then also make a message or show or share that experience with people so that they could empathize. And so what I'd like you to do is think of an aspect that you're dealing with COVID and create a mask that expresses that experience. It doesn't have to be bad. It can be good. It can be funny. It can be heavy. It's really just an aspect of this experience that we're all sharing, but from your perspective. You can use words. As you see that I'm about to do, although I'm doing this very loosely and quickly to just kind of give you some examples. I hope that you spend more time and more thought into it. But you can use this mask as essentially a billboard that you put messages or words or picture on. It's very visible, as you know. You already, I'm sure, have seen people wearing masks that are decorated in all sorts of ways. You can also glue or sew things onto the front of it. And so you have this little sewing kit. It has different colored threads, so you could even embroider things onto the mask. Or you can sew. And if you don't know how to sew, right now you're seeing me thread the needle. But if you've never done this before and you would like some help, please jump onto the Zoom link at the end of class, and I'll be happy to walk you through some basics of sewing. Or at the end of our next class this week, I can also, or feel free to even send me an email. We can make a meeting. I'm happy if you're someone who's never sewn but you want to incorporate that into this. I'm happy to meet with you, answer questions, and kind of walk you through some of the processes. So I'm actually just adding a button. This is a button that came from that little sewing kit that you see in front of me. That was actually my grandmother's, my Nana's sewing kit. So I'm just putting something comforting on there that reminds me of her. And there's really no limit. I'm not, this doesn't need to be a usable piece when you're done. This is an art piece. So as you saw earlier with Tanya's work, it wasn't something that, it wasn't in a way like a realistic device, and that it was usable. Is more symbolic. And so this is a symbolic mask that is meant to be more expressive and express some of your experiences than it is to be something that you have to wear out in public or something that is usable on a day-to-day basis. If you look at the assignment prompt too, I've also invited you to, if you want to do something that's more performative, meaning take a video of you doing an interaction with the mouse, that is an okay thing to submit for your art project too. This is really more of a meditation or just kind of thinking about what you can do to this mouse to just kind of express some part of your experience with COVID. And here I'm even cutting some holes into it. If you wanted to do something more destructive, hopefully you would do it in a much more artful way than I am doing right now. I'm just doing it to kind of for an example. But you can even cut it up and make something else with it, or cut it up in a creative way to create something that expresses this idea of COVID. Yeah, so my holes are pretty much just to show you an example. But I am sure that you will have much more exciting ideas. So that extremely short demo is just because there really are no specific rules with this project. It is really any materials you want to use, although I've provided you with permanent markers, but any materials you want to use to change, augment this mask. So the assignment is to using the mask provided for you in the Studio Art Kit, or you may use one of, or create, or even make your own. Design a mask that physically or symbolically communicates a feeling or reaction you experience with the COVID epidemic. Acceptable project submissions include drawing on the masks with the markers, sewing things onto the mask, cutting up or changing the mask. You can even make it useless. Film a performance or action with the mask, or some other creative and thoughtful action that makes us think. The project is due the day before your class next week on Tuesday or Wednesday. If you have any questions, just come to the Zoom link or send me an email, and I look forward to seeing what you make.